Greetings and welcome to Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation. To our members, friends, and everyone joining us in our virtual congregation on YouTube today.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Robin Landerman Zucker, minister of this congregation, and I will be hosting our virtual recorded worship service for today, Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, with Worship Associate Nancy Paxton and music from Roomie Wood, Stephanie Galloway, and some recorded selections. My sermon today is entitled Inequality for All, the Immorality of the Wealth Gap in America, in honor of International Workers' Day. We're glad you're here and that you've made Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation a part of this day in your spiritual life. We're here every week on YouTube, and we'll be at home at 510 North LaRue Street whenever it is safe for us to gather together. We're hoping to be able to be together this summer. And whether you are a regular viewer or you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Our congregation is spiritually open and intentionally inclusive. Whoever you are and whomever you love, you are always welcome here, and we will joyfully marry you here as well. Our members and friends bring many interests, theologies, and viewpoints to our door. And here we trust that you will find a common desire for meaningful community and spiritual growth and relevant religious exploration in a framework with very flexible borders. Membership in this congregation is open to anyone who chooses to walk with us in the spirit of love, the search for truth, and the pursuit of justice. As I light the chalice, the symbol of our free faith, I invite you to light a candle or a chalice at home and join me in the response words that you will see on your screen.
We light this chalice with a flame that draws us together. With this flame, we cut through the darkness of isolation and are warmed by the fires of our inner connection.
Our mission and covenant reflect our values and our vision of ourselves as a gathered community in the world. Please join in saying the mission and covenant. You will see the words on your screen. The mission of Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation is to be a welcoming community that embraces diverse thought and belief and builds a just, peaceful, and compassionate world. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in kindness. Thus do we covenant. And now, Worship Associate Nancy Paxton has some opening words for us.
Psalm for Those Who Go Forward Before Daylight by Carl Sandburg. The policeman buys shoes, slow and careful. The teamster buys gloves, slow and careful. They take care of their feet and hands. They live on their feet and hands. The milkman never argues. He works alone and no one speaks to him. The city is asleep when he is on the job. He puts a bottle on 600 porches and calls it a day's work. He climbs 200 wooden stairways. 2 horses are company for him. He never argues. The rolling mill men and the sheet steel men are brothers of cinders. They empty cinders out of their shoes after the day's work. They ask their wives to fix burnt holes in the knees of their trousers. Their necks and ears are covered with a smut. They scour their necks and ears. They are brothers of cinders.
Please join me in singing As We Come Marching, Marching. ancient song of good, small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days. The rising of the woman means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler can the toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
Now is the time in our service when you're invited to share a personal joy or sorrow in the supportive presence of this community. There are many joys and sorrows in our lives, and today, rather than dropping a lot of stones in the water that are somewhat generic, I'd like to ask you I'm going to give a longer time during the quiet time for joys and sorrows, when you think about what you've been joyful about these past weeks, these past months, maybe just today. What is it that brings you joy? Or what is it that might bring you joy? Or you're looking forward to having joy brought into your life when our worlds open up a bit more? May we feel joy. And may we also feel sorrow. This has been a time with a lot of stress, a lot of loss, a lot of anxiety, a lot of sort of befuddlement almost about what we've been experiencing both together and individually. So what do you feel sorrowful about? Some time ago, one of these virtual services that I'm sure you can find called Happy-ish, the upside of negative emotions, I talked about how we need both happiness and sadness acknowledged in our life in order to be fully human and healthy and balanced. So I'm going to ask you to also think about what you feel some sorrow about. And I will say, as I always do, there are many joys and sorrows that remain unspoken, but let us remember that everyone is fighting their own private battle. We know not what it is, but because we're human, we know it to be true. So let us be kind, compassionate, flexible, and forgiving with one another. And let us hold on to hope in whatever way you understand that in your life. Hope. May it create ripples in and through us and beyond us. And now some quiet time for you to reflect on your own joys and sorrows, followed by some music for intentional breathing, 4 beats in slowly through your nose, 5 beats out slowly through your mouth, creating spaciousness as you go.
Our reading today is called The Kindness of Lo Mein by Cara Anderson. My friend Marcy and her boyfriend Brian recently ate dinner at a local Chinese restaurant. As they enjoyed a plate of lo mein, engrossed in conversation, a hand reached down and ushered away their platter of noodles. A voice, quick and agitated, mumbled, "Sorry," and a thin, poorly dressed woman left the restaurant with their plate of lo mein. In astonishment, they watched her walk down the street, holding the plate with the flat of her hand as she stuffed noodles into her mouth, slapping sharply against her face. The owner realized what had happened and darted out the front door, chasing after the noodle thief. The owner realized what had happened, blocking her way and grabbing a side of the plate. A struggle ensued. Noodles slid uneasily from one side to the other, slopping over the edge. He surged forward and pulled with a heroic, strong-arm attempt to retrieve his plate. The woman's fingers slid from the plate. Noodles flew, then flopped pathetically on the sidewalk. Left empty-handed, with soggy, contaminated noodles at her feet, the woman stood with arms hung dejectedly at her side. The owner walked victoriously back to the restaurant with the soiled plate in his hand. My friends were given a new heaping plate of lo mein, although they had already consumed half the stolen plate. A stream of apology in Chinese came from the proprietor. Unable to eat anymore, they asked to have the noodles wrapped up and set off to see their movie. A block later, they happened upon the lo mein thief. My friend, unsure about what to do, listened to her boyfriend's plea to just walk away, but she didn't. Instead, she walked over to the thief and said, "We haven't formally met, but about 10 minutes ago, you were interested in our noodles. They gave us some new ones. Are you still hungry?" The woman nodded and extended her bony arms. She took the styrofoam container in her hands, bowed ever so slightly, and murmured, "Thank you. You are very kind." What makes us walk away from discomfort, from despair, or decide to stay? You could say a lot about my friend's story, a lot about generosity, kindness, attention, and thievery. I'm more interested in what motivates us to confront that which makes us uncomfortable and makes us look at the guts and grit of our decisions. The choices to not address things that are uneasy, unbalanced, or unbelievable. When our foundations start to shake, we can feel the tremors move up our legs and into our torsos, and we want more than anything to make it stop. Anyhow, anyway. My friend Marcy could feel herself shake. I know because she told me so. But she chose not to walk away. She dealt with uncomfortableness. She held firm in the muck. Sometimes that's all we need or can do to get to the other side, the side where generosity, comfort, kindness, and action reside, the side where foundations are firm and stable and one's shaking walks back to the other side.
The musical interlude you're about to hear, a virtual choir version of the Stephen Foster American parlor song classic, "Hard Times Come Again No More." The song was written in 1854, prior to the Civil War, and became a very popular anthem during that war. Many people think it was written during the Depression in the 1930s, and it became a very common and popular lament and anthem during that time as well. Sadly, the song is all too timely yet again. May one day this song be seen as a relic of a past time. My sermon today is entitled Inequality for All, the Immorality of the Wealth Gap in America. Did you see the film Elysium? It was released back in 2013 to kind of mixed reviews. The premise is fairly simple. The film is set in 2154, when the planet has been ravaged by disease, pollution, and overpopulation. The wealthiest now live on a space station called Elysium, which can be glimpsed through the murky haze from Earth below. Max, played by Matt Damon, has grown up watching Elysium from his rundown, largely Latino LA neighborhood. A reformed car thief who is now working in a grueling factory job he's lucky to have, he's sneeringly informed, Max is trying to keep things together in a society that is now openly rigged against the poor. If you click on the film's official website, there is a link called "You Won't Find a Better Home on Earth," which cleverly mimics the kind of glossy housing development websites you might find to sanitize gated communities like Disney's surreal Celebration Florida. In 2021, 133 years pre-Elysium, the American affluent may not live on a space station, but they are often sequestered in enclaves, just as exclusive, and people are looking through a lot of haze, getting a glimpse of them. Coincidentally, the same year that Elysium was released and hit the multiplex, you remember going to the multiplex, right? Thousands recreated the March on Washington as a 50th anniversary tribute to Martin Luther King's dream and his rallying cry in society to change what it was so irretrievably broken. And King called for radical change in our society, and he was masterful at connecting racism, moral behavior, and poverty in America. He pioneered what we now call fusion coalitions and intersectionality long before those terms became social justice buzzwords. You may recall, or perhaps you don't even know, that part of King's campaign for the poor, he advocated a minimum wage of $2. Right, that doesn't even buy a small cup of coffee these days. But adjusted to 2021 numbers, the minimum wage of $2 an hour would be $15 an hour. And what is the federal minimum wage? $7.25 in most states. In Flagstaff, we have come up to the relatively lush $15 an hour, and it's still mighty challenging to live securely on that wage, especially with local housing and rental prices skyrocketing because of, you guessed it, an affluent influx. Where are the teachers, firefighters, medical assistants supposed to live? Martin Luther King died during his campaign, this campaign for the poor. And sadly, one of Jesus's astute predictions from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14, which King often quoted, is still so agonizingly true. The poor you will always have with you. In America, those poor have gotten farther and farther from the wealthy in wages, wealth distribution, and power. How did this happen? And how can we continue marching on for a decent, moral, and economically just society? I wish I had a definitive answer to that question. I do not. And I ask you to join me in the thinking process on this very complex and disturbing social and moral issue. What I do have are ideas, ponderings, questions, and the leadership of the Reverend William Barber and his Poor People's Campaign, which models intersectionality, wrapped around a moral imperative to effect radical change. You can learn more about that at the very easy to remember poorpeoplescampaign.org. But let's go back to 2013 one more time. That summer, the year that Elysium came out, Walmart was pressured to pay its employees fairly, and throughout the blogosphere, McDonald's was widely derided for releasing an insulting and clueless budget to help employees plan financially that only underscored how brutally hard it is to live on McDonald's minimum wage. Do you remember that fiasco? Writing in the New Yorker magazine, James Surowiecki explains that the reason this became a big political issue is not that the jobs changed, it's that the people doing the jobs have changed. Historically, low-wage work tended to be done by either the young or by women looking for part-time jobs to supplement their family's income. Walmart, in its early days, sought explicitly to hire underemployed married women. The minimum wage workforce, meanwhile, was dominated by teenagers. Now, plenty of family breadwinners are stuck in these jobs. Is it that change which has driven the demand for higher pay? Probably. The situation is a result of a tectonic shift in the American economy and culture. In 1960, the country's biggest employer, General Motors, was also its most profitable company and one of its best paying. It had high profit margins and real pricing power, even when it was paying its workers livable union wages. And it was not alone. Firms like Ford, Standard Oil, and Bethlehem Steel, they employed huge numbers of well-paid workers while earning very big profits. There was an understanding of mutual loyalty among workers and companies that has all but vanished. The gig economy has mushroomed in the face of uncertain job security and the pandemic lockdown. Remote work is now the norm. However, today, the country's biggest employers are still retailers and fast food chains operating on slim profit margins, almost all of which have built their businesses on low pay, low prices, and by keeping unions at bay. Insert Amazon's Alabama warehouse here. If we want to transform these jobs into living wage employment, we'll have to accept higher prices. But we've had decades to get used to cheap stuff in America. In fact, Americans feel entitled to cheap stuff. Look at all the dollar stores and Dollar Generals that have sprung up everywhere in our country. And what do we do with all this stuff? At an increasingly alarming rate, we store it. Did you know that storage facilities are one of the fastest growing sectors of our economy? The statistics are staggering. 2.3 billion square feet of storage space. Some folks are storing stuff they can't part with. Others are storing what's left of their lives after evictions and foreclosures. There's even a massively popular reality show in which people bid on other people's foreclosed and unforeseen storage containers, hoping to unearth a treasure. It is bizarrely American. Yet in this land of plenty, there is plenty of waste. 1 in 6 American children face hunger issues. Yet we waste $165 billion worth of uneaten food a year. There are thousands of inhabitable or rehabable empty dwellings in our country, while more than 500,000 people and climbing live on the streets. It is a soul sickness in our society and a genuine moral crisis, whether we were born on third base or first. As the star of the documentary called Inequality for All, Robert Reich, former labor secretary and one of America's foremost economists, spent years pre-pandemic circuit riding across the US, spreading the gospel about our increasing wealth gap and its impact on our democracy and on our very decency. His rhetoric rose in pitch during the Trump administration, not surprisingly, and their openly callous policies, coupled with the biggest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in history. Reich tells us that folks often ask him, "Who does it better?" To which he answers, "Well, we did from 1947 to 1977. But now we have the most unequal distribution of wealth in the world, with the 400 richest Americans owning more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans combined. Shades of Elysium. And the pandemic didn't slow that down. The ultra-wealthy, Americans with $30 million of assets and up, they suffered a brief setback at first, and then the market rebounded, and scores of new billionaires have been minted, while foreclosures and unemployment lines swelled. Yet, according to some fascinating social science experiments, joining the super wealthy will not make you more compassionate or generous, unless you are Bill and Melinda Gates, Oprah, Mackenzie Bezos, and some others. The rich in lab settings are less likely to relate to the suffering of others. There are much higher rates of entitled and narcissistic behaviors, and an uptick in the belief in ethical relativism, ethics are relative, and that the less fortunate have actually earned their lack of success. Systemic racism, it's not even on the radar screen for the most part. While this level of inequality threatens us all, the middle class is fueling and expressing a particular rage about the loss of the American dream John Winthrop spoke of in 1650, the shining city on the hill, the promise of advancement and prosperity for those who work hard and color inside the lines. Yet even that dream, its emphasis on consuming, may be ripe for re-examination. As the Reverend Marilyn Sewell has lamented, and I agree with her, we are a nation where freedom has now been interpreted to mean that the strong don't have to care about the weak. We are a nation that stinks from corruption at the top, a nation which dresses itself in God language, pandering unashamedly to the rich while ignoring the poor. We are a nation hated and reviled, she says, by many other nations and grudgingly tolerated by those who would count us as friends. We are far from that city upon a hill, that moral compass for other nations. Rather, we have decided to build empire that a few might flourish at the expense of the many. I certainly see some movement in another direction with the Biden administration. 100 years of decency as of today. But a consumerist American dream is not worthy of our lives, Sewell continues. The emptiness of that narrative will become apparent as young people reach out for meaning in a society no longer grounded in communitarian values. Aren't we seeing that in the youth that has stepped forward to lead the fight for climate change, against climate change and for the climate crisis, and the youth who organized the March for Our Lives in 2018? I attended one of those marches. There was a sense of intersection with non-UUs around an issue that impacts us all, gun violence. That is the goal, intersecting for dignity, for justice, for all. A decent society feels the reverberations of income inequality as a spiritual and personal wound, as those affected by poverty suffer with feelings of powerlessness, loss of sense of self, loss of sense of historical participation. They're less likely to vote. They feel their voices don't matter, and they have low self-esteem. Not to mention an incredible uptick in the susceptibility to suicide and drug addiction. More than ever, people need leadership, courage, energy, and a moral imperative to get them moving. I am feeling hopeful for the first time in at least 4 years. That moral imperative is there, given that the major world religions already include a spiritual practice of helping the needy. Tzedakah in Judaism, Dana in Buddhism, Seva in Hinduism, Zakat in Islam. What is our spiritual practice of charity, our moral imperative in Unitarian Universalism? First, our UU congregations must continue to be gathering places for such activity. That was the impulse and the motivation behind the Activate event that we intended to have the very Sunday that we shut down because of the pandemic. But we will reorganize it, and we will have it again to bring groups together in Flagstaff to intersect on justice issues. According to scholars Paul Ray and Sherry Anderson, we UUs are so-called core cultural creatives, a growing segment of the US population who embrace a new culture that values diversity, stewardship of the environment, economic justice, and civil rights for all, and combine these values in some sort of spiritual practice or religious affiliation, like Beacon. We do model that here and have modeled that here at Beacon in our social justice allies and beyond, and in the way we partner with fusion coalitions like UU Justice Arizona. And I believe we are growing more confident about seeking out the truth on justice issues and how we relate to them from our social location, our racial location, even if that truth makes us a little bit uncomfortable or a lot uncomfortable. Which brings us back to that passage from Mark 14. The poor you will always have with you. Scholars have debated the meaning of this verse. Is Jesus simply saying that this is the way the world will always be, that there will always be poor people, one segment of the population that will be that community? Regrettably, that may be true. Or is this verse a call to service and action, reminding his disciples that they had better remember to have the poor always with them, because they did in fact sign on as a compassion brigade? I'll opt for that interpretation. Why? Because we can be such a brigade, counting ourselves among those who lean into simple gestures like the kindness of lo mein from our reading earlier, or slightly bigger acts like serving at the Flagstaff Food Center, like many of us do. And perhaps, if I've inspired you sufficiently, even larger commitments we can make together, like joining or supporting Reverend Barber's Poor People's Campaign with a financial contribution, with our voices, with our marching feet, and most definitely with our votes. Barber calls this campaign a moral revival, not just economic activism. They are repairers of the breach, not pundits. Reverend Barber is extraordinarily dynamic. He had a bunch of UUs at the 2016 GA in Columbus, Ohio, swaying and amening like Pentecostals. Find him online and listen to just one sermon. You'll see. Jim Wallace, a respected liberal Christian social activist and writer, reminds us gently that the critical difference between Jesus' disciples and a middle-class church is precisely this: our lack of real proximity. Let me repeat that. Our lack of real proximity to the poor. The continuing relationship to the poor that Jesus assumes will be natural for his disciples. It's unnatural for a middle class or affluent church, even a humanist UU church like ours. That said, looking out from this virtual pulpit, I see a congregation I feel that I know. And I know that some of us here are now unemployed, underemployed, or struggling right now financially. Some of us are convincingly but anxiously class passing in order to fit in. Some of us work with the poor, the ill, the homeless, the hungry, those captive in this debate. Wherever we fall on the economic spectrum, we can band together with others beyond Unitarian Universalism through successful and strategic movements like the Poor People's Campaign to change the very structures that hold us up and away from the social location of the poor. So I ask as an invitation rather than any kind of scolding, what will be the pebble in your shoe when you have finished listening to this sermon today? How will you go about thinking about these issues? How could we work on them together in real time? How might we savor the world and also save it? All minds, hearts, hands, and ideas are welcome. Email me, minister@beaconuu.com, and we'll talk some more. Let us remember that when we change, the world changes. We will have to leave home, in a sense, leave our comfortable ways of being to find ourselves and our callings. Elysium offers a cautionary tale about a ravaged future beyond repair. Let's build that better home here in 2021, right here, right now, on earth, for the brothers of the cinders, the beloveds at the filling station, for all of us. We'll need to develop a compassionate discontent and a discipleship about the statement that the poor you will always have with you. For in a truly shining city on a hill, siding with love, this desperate reality need not endure. May hard times come again no more. So may we rise to be repairers of the breach. Blessed be, blessed we, blessed all, and amen.
Please join me in singing Building a New Way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without this, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry.
The spirit of generosity and gratitude flows through Beacon. Each week, whether we are here in our physical sanctuary or here in our virtual sanctuary on YouTube, we take an offering to support Beacon and our programs. There are two ways for you to donate. You can go to our website, www.beaconuu.com, find the donate button, and make a secure online donation through the Vanco application. If you use this method, we ask that you use a bank account rather than a credit card to save us some fees, so there will be more for Beacon, especially during this challenging and transitional time. Or you can send us a check to Beacon, 510 North LaRue Street, Flagstaff, Arizona, 86001. Either way, we are so grateful for your generosity, helping Beacon be strong and stay strong now and into the future, so that we can share this message that you heard today and be a community for all. And finally, at the end of the service, we come together when we're here in our sanctuary and we form a circle and we hold hands. And we feel the love, the strength, and the connection of this community. We've been doing that virtually during this time of meeting on YouTube. So I invite you to reach out your hands, imagine us in a circle holding hands, and feel the warmth, feel the love, feel the presence, feel the connection. Because whether we are together or apart, what we've learned this past 15 months and will continue learning is that we are Beacon, always connected. Stay safe and well. Reach out to me anytime. Blessed be, blessed we, and amen. And now Nancy has some closing words for us.
Our closing words today is a poem called Filling Station by Elizabeth Bishop. Oh, but it's dirty, this little filling station, oil-soaked, oil-permeated to a disturbing overall black translucency. Be careful with that match. Father wears a dirty, oil-soaked monkey suit that cuts him under the arms, and several quick and saucy and greasy sons assist him. It's a family filling station, all quite thoroughly dirty. Do they live in the station? It has a cement porch behind the pumps, and on it a set of crushed and grease-impregnated wickerwork. On the wicker sofa, a dirty dog, quite comfy. Some comic books provide the only note of color, of certain color. They lie upon a big, dim doily, draping a tabaret, part of the set, beside a big hirsute begonia. Why the extraneous plant? Why the tabaret? Why, oh why, the doily? Embroidered in daisy stitch with marguerites, I think, and heavy with gray crochet. Somebody embroidered the doily. Somebody waters the plant, or oils it maybe. Somebody arranges the rows of cans so that they softly say, "Eso, so, so, so," to high-strung automobiles. Somebody loves us all.
We shall not give up the fight, we have only started, we have only started, we have only started. We shall not give up the fight, we have